Hello. In this session, I'm going to give an overview of the original 8-phase model of EMDR. There are a lot of ways of doing EMDR, a lot of variants that exist depending on what a client is presenting with and also who the client is. So for instance, the way we do EMDR with children is somewhat different than the way we do it with adults. But I'm going to focus on the original 8-phase model because that's what's traditionally used in therapy, and I want to give you a sense of what to expect in EMDR treatment. So EMDR can be broken down into 8 main phases that fall within 3 different categories or stages. Stage 1 of EMDR treatment is called planning. Stage 2 is processing, and stage 3 is summarization. So within stage 1, planning, we have 2 phases of EMDR, phases 1 and 2. The first phase of EMDR really focuses on completing the intake with the client, doing treatment planning, and then focusing on something called target sequence planning. So with any therapy that you complete, you're always going to be doing probably an intake with your clinician, and your clinician's always going to be talking to you about treatment planning, but the part that's specific to EMDR is the target sequence planning. So that's kind of a fancy term, but really all it means is that in this phase 1, you're going to focus on identifying what you're going to do EMDR with or on. So the target of EMDR usually is a memory. A specific memory that EMDR is going to help you reconsolidate and refile. The target, however, doesn't always have to be a memory. It could also be an emotion or a sensation, or maybe it's just a negative belief about yourself. In the next session, I'll go into detail about how target sequence planning works and what the steps are for this. In phase 2, we're going to shift the focus a little bit away from target sequence planning onto what we call preparation. So what we're doing is we're preparing the client to be able to go through the meat of EMDR, go through the desensitization, which is actually phase 4, and the reprocessing of that trauma, which is phase 5. What we're going to be doing is learning and practicing tools and techniques that can help you learn how to feel grounded and calm and stable. Because of course, when we activate trauma networks, it's going to be distressing. So we want to make sure that we feel as though we can cope with that. And these tools and techniques have been shown to help clients be able to activate these trauma networks without feeling engulfed by them, without feeling out of control. So we're going to talk about those methods in phase 2. Phase 3 of EMDR actually begins stage 2 of EMDR, which is processing. We can think of stage 2 and phases 3 through 6 as being the real meat of EMDR. In phase 3, the main objective is to access and activate that trauma network using the target that we identified in phase 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate the entire neural network by activating the specific target or memory along with sensations and emotions that go with that memory. Because once we activate that trauma network, then we can strategically begin to alter it and shift it in the direction of health. Phase 4 of EMDR, desensitization, is when you begin to habituate to that target or the thing that you're afraid of, or that traumatic memory that haunts you. In this phase, we incorporate bilateral stimulation, or BLS, to help you process through the distress of this memory in a more manageable way. And in a future session, I'm going to say a little more about bilateral stimulation and why it is so important in EMDR. But the goal with this phase is for this target or this memory to go from being a trauma network, isolated, scary, dangerous, into behaving more like an adaptive network, where the memory becomes a little less distressing. So clients tell me, okay, it feels like a memory now, as opposed to it feeling like it's happening to me all over again. And that's one way I know that desensitization has worked. So that's really the goal of phase 4. In phase 5, that's when we're going to begin to integrate that now non-trauma network with other adaptive, helpful networks. So the title of phase 5 is installation. And really, I prefer the word integration. What we're going to do is we're going to integrate into that previously traumatized network more positive, adaptive networks with helpful information. So now we're going to have a more integrated brain and a more healthy brain. Then moving into phase 6. In phase 6, what we're doing is we want to just make sure that this old neural network, that negative neural network, has been sufficiently neutralized by checking in with the body. So neural networks are comprised of a lot of different components, and physical sensations is one of them. And I would argue actually that physical sensations comprise a lot of our emotional experience. So when I'm treating somebody with anxiety, for instance, when they come to me, a lot of times they'll say that their thoughts are unbearable. I just need to stop having this thought about dying in the plane crash because it feels like it's ruining my life and I can't take trips anymore. What people oftentimes don't realize, though, is that usually it's not the thoughts that are so unbearable, but the sensations that go with the thoughts. It's the sensations that accompany, I'm going to die in a plane crash, that feel so overwhelming and unbearable. So because sensations are a key piece of these neural networks, we want to check in with the body through body scan in this phase to ensure that there's no physical distress or tension remaining in the body when we access that network. And if there is any tension or distress that's left there, we want to neutralize it using bilateral stimulation to the best of our abilities. In phase 7, what we're doing is summarizing what just happened in session. So no matter how far in EMDR you get or you don't get, so for instance, you might get through desensitization, but you might run out of time and not get to maybe installation in that particular session, no matter what, your therapist will always lead you into phase 7 before you leave the office. Phase 7 is when we close up shop. So when I'm doing phase 7 with the client, I'm summarizing the gains made. I'm asking them how that went for them, any impressions that they might have, any experiences that they might want to share with me. And I also prepare them for what to expect after the session. So I tell them what normal reactions might be after doing EMDR and prepare them for dealing with any residual stress that they might be having through doing some resourcing or stabilization or grounding techniques, which are the ones that we learned previously in phase 2. So they get ready to go back out into the world. In phase 8, it is called reevaluation. That's the name of phase 8. And it's kind of what it sounds like. Phase 8 will take place at the beginning of the next session with the client. So we end the previous session with phase 7, and then the next time they come back to the office, we're starting off with phase 8, reevaluation. So I'm going to be checking in with them about maybe how the past few days or week has gone, depending how long it's been since I've seen them, asking them about any effects that they've noticed, any new insights. And what I'll usually do is another iteration of phases 3 through 6, where we check back in with that target, maybe that they've habituated to make sure that the gains they made in that last session have persisted into this session. At the end of the 8 phases, EMDR is complete. But we like to take with EMDR what we call a 3-pronged approach. And what the 3-pronged approach is that we're going to go through these 8 phases of EMDR, not just with past events that have happened, so past targets, but we'll also actually repeat those 8 phases with any current triggers that might be occurring in the person's life. And then we're going to repeat the entire process with future anticipated events. So we call this future template. So times that they think, I think something like this might come up in the future, and I want to make sure I'm prepared for it. So we can actually do EMDR with future events. Remember, these neural networks that we're shifting, they do contain past memories, but they also contain thoughts or fears or worries about future events. So we can do EMDR with past, present, and future events. An example of this that I've had recently is with a client who, when she was about 5 years old, she slipped and she fell into the deep end of the pool, and she didn't really know how to swim yet. And thankfully, she was rescued out of the pool by her mother very, very quickly. But this was really encoded in her brain as a trauma memory. And as an adult to this day, she doesn't like swimming pools very much, or at least she didn't. So when we focused on EMDR, we really focused on that target of that event. We call it the touchstone memory, that key intense event that happened when she was 5 years old that led to the development of this trauma network. And we completed EMDR on that past memory. But then we also went through the process again with a couple of little bit different but similar memories that she had of childhood, even involving a bathtub once and falling under the water. So we completed the phases with those more mild events. And while she wasn't facing any current triggers at the time because it was winter time and the swimming pools were closed, we did focus on future anticipated events when she knew, for instance, that she might be invited to a pool party. And now, as a mother herself, she has small children and she wants them to not feel as afraid of the water as she has felt her whole life. So she's wanting to go to the pool with them and really mirror for them a feeling of fun and safety when she's around swimming pools. So once we were able to go through this process in these 8 phases, these 3 stages of EMDR with anticipated future events, that's when she really felt as though her EMDR treatment was complete.